Good day, good afternoon, Chicago. How are you doing? This is Bruce Montgomery, and thank you for joining me on another edition of Technology Access Television. Yeah, we're still out here talking about technology, and today we're going to continue a conversation that we started, talking about a technology that is so critical to almost all other technologies, but we sometimes take it for granted. And I'm talking about electricity, the power that is back of all of the things that we're using. And you know, the technology of electricity is going through a monumental change. This is not your grandfather's utility anymore. It's going to be dynamic, it's going to be resilient, it's going to be interactive, and it really is the overlay of all we know about so many other technologies coming to bear on the producing, the generation, the storage, and the managing of electrical distribution. And my guests today are all in the weeds on this stuff because this is their life's work. This is what they do. They're working for our utility ComEd. And that person and that organization, that entity in that organization, is so much involved with the intersection of these changes that you would probably not believe it. But guess what? It's coming to a neighborhood near you. And one of the communities that's in the center of this change is none other than the Bronzeville community on Chicago's South Side. And that is the epicenter of some very strategic initiatives that are happening. And my guests today are going to talk about these initiatives and how they're not going to just impact the community of Bronzeville, but what it portends for other communities all across their service area from one side of the state to the other. My guests today are a good friend of mine, Melissa Washington. Melissa, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Bruce.
All right, and you brought your favorite engineer along with you, Mr. Russell DeSalvo. Thank you for being here as well.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you guys could come back and continue a discussion that we started before about how some of these technologies are not just being talked about in theory, but are actually getting worked out in a practical way right again in our own community. And one of the initiatives that you guys started with this notion of the community of the future. Exactly. Tell us about this concept, the community of the future.
Well, we've talked about the fact that the utility industry is changing, right, and evolving. And it's evolving for several reasons. We said that the customers' change in expectations around the utility industry is one component that's driving it, but then also innovation is driving it. Mm-hmm. And the community of future really wraps in both of those things because it's about the engagement of the community and it's also about innovation around what you're hearing from the customers in that engagement. So in 2016, we launched something called the Community of the Future. And it's really our method of trying to wrap around both community engagement and innovation. And we started with Bronzeville for many reasons. I mean, I don't have to tell you how significant Bronzeville is just with their historical significance with the Great Migration. But then when you really look at the center of Bronzeville and who's in it and the demographic, the diversity in the residents that are there, the education centers that are there, the grade schools, the high schools that are there, and just the different services. So, you know, we thought Bronzeville made sense to look at how we can engage the community because it's a very active community of people who care about that area. And so how can we pull together people who represent that community to talk about what the needs, the desires, and really goals and visions are. And then we try from a ComEd perspective to figure out if there's a technological solution that we can bring either directly from our resources or indirectly with some partners. And we just ideate. We just try to figure out, okay, if safety is an issue, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that we have in our toolkit that might be able to address and partner with, not completely, but at least partially, some of those safety concerns.
Well, I had the good fortune, as we were talking off camera, to be involved with the development and the roll-up this thing called the Future Energy Jobs Act. And I just happened to be around and have some friends and we were talking, but I wanted to be supportive of what the potential of this thing could do. And I was probably just as surprised as anybody else that the legislation actually passed. But I remember that part of that legislation called for having something called the series of microgrids. And I know as the negotiations were going on down in Springfield around this, one by one, they were knocking them off the list. And eventually when the legislation passed, it did not even include the microgrid conversation at all. And I had a conversation with the CEO at the time, Ann Pamajori, and I said, you know, it's unfortunate that the microgrids couldn't. She said, don't worry about it. We're not going to back off of our support, and we're not giving up this fight. And to her word and to the organization's commitment, ultimately, the microgrid project was in fact revived and did in fact come to the community of the future in Bronzeville, and now is a part of that process. Mr. DeSalvo, can you tell me what is a microgrid and why should anybody care?
Sure. So a microgrid is a smaller portion of the grid or a smaller system that can run independent of the grid or it can run connected to the grid. And the idea is it has generation, right, that can serve your load. So it has either solar or it can have storage, it can have other sources, other types of generators that you're more familiar with that can serve that load. And the idea is it adds resilience. So if you have an incident, if you have a serious incident, we've seen a lot of those recently, right, hurricanes, we've seen other kinds of incidents throughout the world that impact people's lives severely. And if we can do a little bit to help people get back on their feet, if we can do anything to help people get back on their feet and to help maintain the community and the infrastructure as a utility, that's very important to us. So that's why we're focusing on that.
Now, wasn't the, if I'm not mistaken, the Illinois Institute of Technology, which is, of course, is a leading engineering school right in the heart of Bronzeville, right there on 31st, 35th and State, they had started doing some work and created a microgrid on campus, I believe. And how does that tie into the Bronzeville microgrid?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the IIT does have their own private campus microgrid, and it's very, very innovative project. And the Bronzeville community microgrid is actually going to tie directly with that microgrid. So we did get some Department of Energy grants to develop a controller that's capable of doing what we call clustering. And that clustering is making microgrids work together. We see that as something that's really key.
Has this ever happened anywhere within the footprint of ComEd or anywhere else that we know about around the country?
Yeah, definitely not in the footprint of ComEd and nowhere else that we know of in the country.
Wow.
So this is really unique, it's really innovative. And the idea is that these microgrids can work together, they can share resources, and they can make a more stable environment. So the microgrids are smaller, but when they're combined, they become more stable, they become stronger.
And Bruce, that's the exact reason why Ann Parmajori said, no, we're not going to give up, because when you think about the fact that there's no one else that has done this, and we were teed up because there's already an existing microgrid at Illinois Tech, and then we also had grant dollars from the DOE to build this controller. Building and interconnecting those two microgrids will be learnings that not just we as a Chicago can build from, but all across the nation. And the other important thing when you think about it, I'm sure someone at home is saying, we don't have hurricanes in Illinois, but it's not just about hurricanes and when you talk about resiliency, think about if there was something that happened to the grid. And it's also the resiliency and the learnings from a cyber attack perspective, you know, being able to restore something that's very important and critical in restoring safety, in making sure the hospital's still running, or making sure that the police are still able to keep order, whatever it is. Think about those critical things that will restore order in the midst of chaos. And that's why people should care about a microgrid, because it's another advancement in technology that's going to allow different applications as we continue to, you know, evolve in this world we're living in.
Well, in network planning and in telecommunications lingo, nobody wants a single point of failure.
Exactly.
You want to be able to reroute and have self-healing infrastructure that can, even though you might have a glitch, it doesn't take the whole thing down. And so this has been a part of data design and network design for a long time, and now that's coming, the same kind of technology is coming. But let's get it even further down to the man on the street. When we think about what the future is going to look like, there's probably going to be electric vehicles. There are probably going to be some other kinds of sensors and other things going on. What are some of the ways these application pilots are showing up in this community of the future and showing up in Bronzeville?
Well, as I mentioned, we engage with a group of people who are in Bronzeville, care about Bronzeville, have worked in Bronzeville for many years. And there were probably, I'd say, 3 or 4 areas that were very clear that was important. Safety was important, economic development was important,
Yes.
Educating students was clearly important, and customers, you know, having resiliency, and quite frankly, being the first. You know, was all things that we heard.
And that's not a minor issue, because I know as an advocate for technology and technology inclusion, I've always wanted to say, why do we have to be you know, sometimes getting opportunities to engage with technologies in the later stages? Why can't we be on the front end of some of these things and actually be an early adopter and figure out what the benefits are of being that early adopter that could, like you say, have education impact, economic impact? So I'm delighted that the community of the future is in Bronzeville, and I'm delighted that you know, I'm part of that conversation along with many others.
Exactly.
And we're trying to wring out of that some practical benefits. So talk about some of the things that you see are some of the practical benefits that'll be flowing out of this in the near future.
Right.
I think there's some activities that are coming up. Is there an activity in September that's going to be having something to do with this?
There's definitely activities. So from an economic development perspective and awareness and being the first, I think this event we're having in September hits all of those, right?
All right.
So we're going to have a microgrid expo, if you will, as well as a job fair combined, and that's on September 15th, and it's going to be at the Illinois Technology campus, Herman Hall, and we're going to have that 10 to 2. And what we're going to do is showcase the microgrid. So the conversation we're having today just scratches the surface about the microgrid, but people can come and get a more detailed description of what it does, see some renderings about the area that it's covering. And then we will also have different partners that will be coming there. Some of them are hiring, some of them are educating, but it will be an opportunity for people who are looking to get into whether it's the solar industry, the electric industry, Google's going to be part of it. So just different job opportunities that we've asked them, if you're hiring, we want you in the place, and we want to be able to provide access to the community, because we know one key point of making a community stronger is that you have employment opportunities.
That's
for
exactly
people.
right.
So we're trying to be a partner. It's not that we're going to make every one of the hiring opportunities exist, but we're definitely bringing our resources and our partnerships to the table so that there can be opportunities given to the people every day. If I take a step back, we were talking about different pilots and different things. So that's the one event. But we've launched some really good pilots, and there's some more that's coming out. For example, mobility, electric vehicle mobility project was launched last December.
Okay.
And so we're still 6 months into it. We're going to have this as a pilot for about 1.5 years while we get learnings of not only how consumers can benefit from and use an electric vehicle in what I might call like the last mile. So it's short distances within the community. We started with the senior home because we thought, why not our seniors? You know, why not help them have diversity in their options in order to go get medicine, in order to go to the grocery store, you know, visit a doctor, things of that nature. So right now we're at one senior home. We're going to expand it to another one, but it's really giving them those short rides and the opportunity to get around, but we're using sustainable technology, and Russ can talk about it further, but it's around electric vehicles and then also battery storage.
Well, one of the things I found as a person who, again, came from the corporate computer world, that as I got my comeuppance getting out into the community, it's been a humbling experience, and also one of the most significant blessings I've had in my life, because I like to say that regular folks are pretty smart and actually know a lot about a lot of stuff. And I can remember working on a project in Ida B. Wells, and I was talking about the design of a computer lab and a campus community center and doing all this kind of stuff, and the folks sit there and they kind of looked at me and they said, oh, wait a minute, and went back and came back with some architectural drawings and said, is this what you're talking about? And I'm like, what? And so my point is, have you been surprised or in fact feel like vindicated that the community has actually not only bought into these ideas, but it really brought, you know, some creativity, some energy, some innovation, and are just saying, hey, here's how we can use this. And I think one of those things is when we came up with the idea of the Ideathon, and you know, said, hey, maybe we could have the young students from the area schools, Phillips and King High School and Diet, work on some, you know, projects and just ideate around what some of the applications could be. And I remember some people said, well, maybe we need to open it up. Will there be enough interest? I said, no, let's do it right here in the hood and let the young people. And when we were there at the Tech Center over on 35th Street, and all of those teams were around with their various ideas, it was just inspiring to see that, again, from an intergenerational standpoint, the young students, middle school students, high school students, along with their coaches and mentors, that they absolutely got what the potential of some of these technologies could be in terms of two-way communications and IoT and programmable technology that could, be smart about how it operates. And this really has to be a good feeling to know that the community is coming at this from a lot of different directions.
The capabilities of the community was never, ever a doubt or a question. As I mentioned to you earlier, there was various reasons why Bronzeville made sense, and that's definitely one of them, right? So the whole community of the future engagement model is just that, getting the ideas and then participating with the community for that. The Ideathon was energizing, not just the culmination event, but also the project teams working together over a course of 3 to 4 months, and then the ideas and the concepts that they came up with were miraculous, right? We have a video that I encourage people to go to on our website of Ideathon, and you can see on the YouTube the presenters, the winners, and really just the concepts that they came up with were terrific. And you're so right, when you put it in the hands of people who have exposure and they're closest to the issue, and you just give them the support and you listen to them, the opportunities are boundless. And so that's what we're finding with Community of the Future. And again, Russ and we all interact with different companies who have technologies, but they don't have the engagement with the community that we do. And we know how to listen, and we know how to say, okay, how can we connect the two?
And so that's what this is about. On the 15th is all about. Russell, I want to ask you that, and that's a perfect segue. Thank you so much, Melissa, because a lot of things I talk about on the show have to do with entrepreneurship.
Yes.
We not only, jobs are cool. I'm not turning down. Somebody got one for me, I might take one right now. So nothing wrong with working, nothing wrong with being employed. It's a wonderful thing. But also being a business, being an entrepreneur. You guys, now that you've jump-started this microgrid, this Community of the Future, are businesses starting to show up, new partnerships, new people, and also startups coming with some ideas? Are they starting to appear that say, hey, I got an idea of what could bolt onto a microgrid and make a Community of the Future application? How are you fielding inquiries in the area, working with people that want to bring innovation to the party in this context?
Absolutely, we've seen interest from both public and private, parties. We've seen universities who are interested. We've seen startups, entrepreneurs who have great technologies, things that are really interesting. They're looking for an application. They're looking to demonstrate. We have a fantastic lab in the community of Bronzeville. This lab is it's a living lab, right? It's something that we can use the microgrid, we can use the Community of the Future project to really prove out some of these technologies.
Now is that on the campus at IT, or is that over in your space on 35th Street, over there on Iron Street?
Well, no, we work with them all over the place.
All right.
It's pretty much everywhere. We've been engaged with the Energy Foundry. We've been engaged with Argonne Labs. We've been engaged with other groups as well. And what we found is, like Melissa was saying, we are in a really interesting position where we know what the community is looking for. We know our customers, and we can bring our customers together with some of these companies and institutions and the technology so that they can equally benefit. We're in a great spot. We can enable a lot of things with this Community of the Future.
Well, that's a connection that the community is very interested in, because oftentimes it feels like conversations are going on in a room upstairs somewhere, and you're hearing rumblings, but you're not really engaged. This is an opportunity for new partnerships to be created that are empowering for the entire community. And so, again, these technologies, this is not anything you can export. This is going to be done right here, right in our own backyard. Energy efficiency is going to be rolled out in the community. Smart solutions are going to be rolled out in the community. And the uptake and the adoption of these things are just happening right now. I believe you guys, just as we speak, are getting ready to roll out a new app that somebody can use in the Bronzeville community, that they can go on their smartphone, they can check their consumption, they could do some of the comparative analysis. And so the early adoption of these technologies are very important. How do people who listening to this conversation today and says, okay, well, you kind of perked my interest. There may be more going on than I thought about. How do they connect with this kind of stuff? Where are there some websites they can go to? Is there a Community of the Future website that exists? What are some of the ways people can plug into this conversation?
So a couple of things. All of the pilots that we're currently doing have previously launched are, and really this whole concept of Community of the Future is on BronzevilleCommunityoftheFuture.com.
All right.
And I think that no matter whether you're in Bronzeville or outside of Bronzeville, it's important to look at that because we're starting in Bronzeville, you know, kind of a program to see how all these things work together in the community. But our goal is to scale this out all across, you know, our Chicagoland area. But right now it's more trying to figure out what fits where, because each community has a different need, right? And if we go back to the community engagement and role, that's important to understand that. So BronzevilleCommunityoftheFuture.com is one place to go for these pilots. I think that the other thing I want to share, we found some success with people who have gotten engaged with us by scaling their business or even creating new business opportunities, even around energy efficiency. And so you talked about the app, which is really around helping customers, you know, cut back on their energy use and then share their savings with a nonprofit that they care about, right? But what we found is people have gotten involved with being, for example, a energy efficiency installation, or maybe somebody has an HVAC business.
All right.
And then they can then get a transferable skill set of implementing some of these technologies and some of these solutions to help cut back. So these are small business opportunities.
Somebody may come in and install LED lighting.
Exactly.
They may do some other types of
weather
energy
stripping,
retrofit type stuff. Okay.
Exactly, all of that. So it's really what I would say, if there's already a smaller business, they can add this to their suite of things that they do.
Would you suggest they come out on the 15th and kind of experience the microgrid and connect with some of the staff
Energy
at that time?
efficiency will be there.
All right.
Some of our what we call trade allies, who are
Trade
people
allies, yes,
who have done exactly that.
Okay.
And then they've built their businesses around this. That we have millions of dollars that we will be investing in helping customers save money on their energy.
So that was one of the outcomes of the FIJA,
That's exactly
which included some year-to-year scalable growth.
Exactly.
And so more money is going to be spent on energy efficiency in these next few years than ever before.
And I feel like that creates more opportunities for entrepreneurs to either grow their business or create a business when they learn about it. So I think, to your point, if you're interested in finding ways to do that, then the September 15th meeting is important for you.
Very good. Can you think of some ways in which, from a technical standpoint, and you're looking at the kinds of conversations that are going to be coming up, could you just talk briefly, Russell, about some of the areas that are just only going to get more attention in the weeks and months and years to come? What are some of those areas that folks can kind of pay a lot of attention to in terms of how this technology is going to appear that could create some opportunities for both people that want to work in those spaces, but maybe small businesses that want to add value in those spaces as well?
So absolutely. So solar energy and renewables, absolutely. It's a booming industry. We've seen what's happening across the country and here in Illinois.
And this is new for Illinois. The kind of growth that we're going to see in solar, we've never seen before, because for one reason or another, either the tax credits disappeared or other things happened. But now solar is getting really ready to be an industry in Illinois. It
is. It's a booming industry. It's on the rise. It's something that you can still get in on the ground floor, especially if you're interested in STEM. It's a fantastic field to go into. On top of that, sensors, sensor technology and data analytics. So when you think about the data and the amount of data that we're going to generate with this interactive grid and the interactive system, analyzing that data is a growth industry. It's something we've barely scratched the surface. And we're not talking about just Google that's doing this. It's the utility that's doing this too. We're interested in data analytics and how can we learn from that and what intelligence can we derive from that. So it's a booming industry across the board.
Well, I want to thank both of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come on our show today and describe some of this. I'm looking forward to the program on the 15th. For those of you that want to get more information about it, I think you said it was BronzevilleCommunityoftheFuture.com. BronzevilleCommunityoftheFuture.com. Of course, you can go to the ComEd website and probably find a lot of links to a lot of this stuff too. But the important finding here, an important takeaway, is that this is happening right now. This is not something somebody's talking about. It's not way down the road. You don't have to go sleep, wake back up and figure out. It's happening right now. You need to get on this train. Here's a party that pays. I know you got a lot of things you like to do for having fun. Yeah, you might want to have some fun with all the changes going on in this energy landscape. I want to thank my guest today, Melissa Washington, so much for coming on. I want to thank Russell DeSalvo for being here as well. Hey, look, this energy game is the real thing. This is the biggest industry on the planet, and the power that it provides for changing lives and improving the quality of our life cannot be compromised. And so you have a chance to play a role in this. I asked you to take it very seriously and very enthusiastically. The door is open. Let's walk in. My name is Bruce Montgomery. This is another edition of Technology Access Television.